Welcome and thank you very much for joining us for episode 180 of the Blazers Edge podcast, presented to you today by BlazersEdge.com. I'm your weekend host, Chris Lucia.
And I'm your weekend co-host, Brandon Goldner. If you want to reach out to the Blazers Edge Weekend Podcast, you can always hit us up at blazersedgepodcast@gmail.com. And please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We're on iTunes and YouTube. We're on Instagram and Facebook. We're on Twitter. And that's pretty much it. But if you want to give us your feedback, good, bad, indifferent, but mostly good, we would very much appreciate it. And thank you in advance.
Joining us this weekend on the Blazers Edge podcast is Blazers Edge contributor Eric Griffith. Eric, thanks for coming on the show, you dingaling.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I can't wait to hang out with you jabronis for an hour.
Dude, this is gonna be the last podcast that gets released at Blazers Edge before the season starts on Tuesday the 25th. So we're gonna be looking forward to that. You know, we wanted to look at a bunch of, season preview type things, but this podcast being year-round, weekly, we do 2 episodes a week. A lot of this season preview type stuff we started covering back in July, talking about Evan Turner's fit with the team, talking about how Terry Stotts is going to have to tweak his rotation, how the offense is going to look, how the defense is going to look. We talked last week with Danny LaRue. So your general season preview type stuff has already been covered quite a bit, and you're going to be able to find that written on Blazers Edge anyway. So we're going to be talking about a few things that, were kind of on our minds heading into the season. Maybe a few questions that we had that were, maybe looking for answers and hoping for, in the coming weeks as the season unfolds, we get some answers to these questions. So, for now, we want to chew on them. Eric, I want to start talking about Shabazz Napier. Dan the Meringatang Meringue last Wednesday at blazersedge.com posted an article talking about Shabazz Napier's performance this season in preseason, which, quite honestly has seemed to impress quite a few people, including analysts and fans as well. Eric, what's your take on Shabazz Napier and, his potential for snagging a few minutes backing up Dame and CJ at the point guard position this year?
Honestly, I don't really think he has much of a chance. If you look at Lillard's minutes, we like to talk about how much he plays and it would be great to get Lillard on the bench some more. But Lillard actually plays less than 36 minutes per game. He's right there around 35.7, which is right in the same range as guys like LeBron, only 1 more minute than Steph Curry. And he's young enough, and he obviously enjoys playing. I don't really see his minutes going down. Same deal with CJ. He's playing right around 34.5. He's not going to play fewer minutes. And once you add Evan Turner as a third ball handler, I just don't see the time on the court for Napier to really get to be part of the regular rotation on a night-to-night basis.
And just a quick question. How do you see the minutes difference between a Gerald Henderson and an Evan Turner?
I think that's kind of a loaded question because we don't really know how Stotts is going to utilize Turner at the moment. We all like to imagine he's going to be that third ball handler, and so as a third ball handler, does that mean he never plays with Lillard and McCollum like Henderson didn't? Or are there going to be times where he's out there in that small forward role depending on the matchup? So I think it might be a little too early in the season to say for sure how his minutes will differ from Henderson's last season.
And I guess my point is when you look at the Blazers rotation last season, there's obviously a minutes vacuum left by Gerald Henderson signing with, I believe, the 76ers, where he's going to end up starting, which is a good career move for him. But I guess my point is more that, yes, Evan Turner is coming in, but remember that Gerald Henderson is out the door.
Let me throw some trivia in there real quick. Can you name the 3 highest salaried players for the Philadelphia 76ers?
I'm going to let Chris answer this one.
I bet I could wager a guess here. Jared Bayless, Gerald Henderson, Sergio Rodriguez, in no particular order.
Correct. We have a winner.
Isn't that crazy?
And by the way, yeah, that's got to be the funniest cast of misfit toys from the Blazers maybe ever to assemble on one team. Am I right?
And guys, Jarrett Jack was just cut earlier today. I was always a huge Jack fan. And so there is hope that he could be signed by the 76ers and, really solidify their backcourt rotation, turn them into a legitimate top 13 team in the East.
And by the way, there's not going to be any clip better from the NBA than that clip of Jarrett Jack with, I believe, the Toronto Raptors, his shoe untied. He stops dribbling, bends down, ties his shoe as the defender just kind of looks at him, finishes tying his shoe, and then completes the play. Jarrett Jack, MVP for that, if nothing else.
Classic former Blazer Jarrett Jack. Hopefully he lands on his feet after getting released by Atlanta this week. Grant Jarrett, that spot he doesn't have locked up. Greg Steamsa, what do you think about a return to Rip City for Jarrett Jack? Okay, your silence speaks volumes on that one. We'll move on and get back to Shabazz Napier real quick, because I'm looking at the last preseason game we have stats for, and unfortunately against the Jazz it wasn't televised. Portland's 88-84 win over them on Wednesday night. So if I'm looking at the minutes here, you have CJ McCollum playing 28, Damian Lillard playing 27, and Evan Turner playing 23, and Napier played 8. So if CJ and Dame are going to play anywhere near 34 to 36 minutes, up from 27 and 28 respectively in that game, those minutes are going to 100% come at Napier's expense. Just to reiterate what you said, Eric, I don't really see a spot in the rotation for him. If Dame and CJ are going to play major minutes, and there's no indication that they won't, I just don't see the room for it.
And one thing to remember is, even if he doesn't get on the court, he can still be valuable. He's very, very fast. I think someone in our comments section called him like poor man's Allen Iverson or something. And that's the type of player that Lillard obviously has trouble staying in front of defensively. And so he could still have some serious utility for this team as a practice player who really pokes at the weaknesses on defense of Lillard and McCollum and forces them to get better.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, also just injury insurance, this Blazers team is incredibly deep with middling talent. And I would say that Shabazz Napier is among those players for sure.
So I trust Portland Trailblazers president of basketball operations Neil O'Shea's judgment when it comes to evaluating player talent. And personally, I feel like the only way a third string point guard could really affect a team in a negative way would be, in a chemistry wise, right? And like I said, I trust O'Shea. I don't think this is going to be an issue with Napier. Rather, I would say quite the contrary. He's probably, like Eric said, going to be an important practice player. So, me personally, I see no downside to having a solid guy like Napier as your third string point guard, even if he's not going to get any playing time this year.
I think that that's fair. And I do think that there's something about the Blazers culture where they definitely value players that fit into that culture and are reasonable people. And Napier seems to be that, if absolutely nothing else. And obviously a very talented basketball player. And you know what? Maybe Napier would be getting rotation minutes on other teams, on other playoff teams even. It's just the way the Blazers are constructed. There isn't really a defined role for him. But like both of you have already alluded to, he still adds a ton of value for this team.
Shout out to Tim Frazier, who is like a integral member of the New Orleans team right now after riding the pine all of last season, if we're going to talk about third string point guards who suddenly jump into a rotation.
And that's a great point. I want to give a shout out to the Rip City report with Casey Holdall and Joe Freeman, because they both have said that. They've mentioned that the way the Blazers are constructed, while there may not be a role for particular players, it doesn't mean that they're not good. And like you said, Eric, Tim Frazier is a perfect example of that.
So we have about a half dozen preseason games of evidence to look at the way this team is kind of played together. Obviously, it's way too early to make any type of judgment on any individual player, any of the new additions, guys like Evan Turner, the way things are going to work. But Eric, we've been kind of talking at Blazers Edge quite a bit about what the reaction to Evan Turner is going to be, because I'm not sure how I want to frame this. So I suppose I should allow you the opportunity to frame your thoughts on Evan Turner.
Evan Turner makes me worry a little bit. Worry about Evan Turner, that is. Longtime Blazers fans or longtime Blazers Edge fans know there's a proud tradition of a player who kind of becomes a whipping boy almost among the fandom. So Jarrett Jack for stepping on the sideline all the time. Travis Outlaw for the no, 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 yes shot that he was a master of. Nick Batum for his lack of assertiveness. Myers Leonard recently for his lack of development. I fear that Evan Turner is going to play that role this year, especially with the $17 million contract. He's the type of player, and this happened, like Casey Holdahl tweeted during the Utah game, oh, nice take, full court possession by Evan Turner, end-to-end score. Followed up immediately by Evan Turner takes like the most terrible mid-range shot you could imagine, followed by that was the best offensive player Evan Turner has made all preseason. And that's who he is. That's why he's a 6th to 8th best man on a team. And we all have to be ready for that. But I'm afraid the expectations because of the salary are going to be too high for him to start the season.
Well, that's what I want to actually ask you to perhaps clarify, Eric. Do you think that Blazers fans are going to be able to get past the $70 million price tag and just look to what Evan Turner can add to this team? Or do you think that Blazers fans, for as long as Turner is on the Blazers, are forever going to look at his contract and wish that he is living up to that?
I think it's going to be a matter of being willing to weigh the good versus the bad. And as long as the good is outweighing the bad, accept that that's the player that he's always been and go with that. And so if they're looking for him to be the perfect player, to not make very many mistakes, that's not going to happen. But if people can accept that, you know what, for every 3 good plays, you get 1.75 bad plays, then I think the salary thing will fade into the background.
Once the ball goes up in the air and you're watching the game, like how much are you guys legitimately looking at a guy and being like, he's overpaid? How much? Or conversely, are you looking at a guy and saying he's underpaid? How often are you legitimately thinking about how much a dude is getting paid while you're watching him? I mean, it's pretty important in the analysis of the team if you want to have any sort of advanced analysis. But when you're watching the game, I'm not really thinking about this kind of stuff.
I think that that's a fair point, Chris. And also, when I'm a fan looking at a game, watching a game, and following what's happening, I'm looking for, I mean, if you're talking about kind of game to game and season-wide growth, you're looking at how a team works together. You're looking at how they can collectively be their best selves. And if Evan Turner plays some small role in that, some small consistent role in that, I do think that fans are going to be able to look past the price tag a little bit more than if perhaps he never fits into a role, if he's trying to be somebody that he's not. I think that's going to be harder for fans. But again, if he has a consistent role and he plays that role well, I do think that fans will be able to look past that personally.
You guys ever heard of J.D. Drew?
Baseball player?
Yeah, exactly. So J.D. Drew in 2007 signed an infamously gigantic contract to come play for the Red Sox, and he underachieved all season. He hit like 215 or something all year. Then in the playoffs, I think it was the ALCS, he hit something like 3 home runs in 4 games or something absurd and almost single-handedly propelled the Red Sox to the World Series. I think it's a similar kind of thing with Turner, where his contract is going to be a concern and there's going to be grumbling whenever he plays poorly. But the second he hits those 3 home runs to win a playoff series for the Blazers, it's all going to be forgotten. And there's going to be 1,000 tweets saying, you know what, Evan Turner was worth it.
And I mean, personally, I'm looking forward to, and I mean, what have we had? 5 preseason games. It's not a big enough sample size really to get a sense of how this team is going to work together, particularly if you consider that Coach Stotts has not been rolling out his regular season rotations. These are preseason rotations. These are preseason games. So it's going to take at least 15 or 20 games of regular season play to see exactly what role, A, that Coach Stotts wants Evan Turner to play, and B, how well he can play that role. Because personally, I'm looking forward to like a super Blazers bench. We saw last year let's ignore what happened last year, and let's just say that if the Blazers have a starting lineup that's good enough to get a lead, and they have a secondary lineup that's good enough to hold that lead or possibly even extend that lead against other teams' benches, that's extraordinarily valuable. So I don't see Evan Turner as a starter. I see him as like a super sub, and if he's comfortable with that, if he can play that role, then I'm definitely looking forward to what he can do this regular season.
And what you mentioned about, waiting several games, at least a few dozen games into the season to really evaluate a guy kind of reminds me of Gerald Henderson last year. I mean, coming off of that hip injury, being a summer addition to the Blazers, working his way into that lineup, he didn't look good until 2016, a few months into the season. And then it turned out he ended up being one of the most important players for the Blazers coming off the bench. So that just kind of goes to show we can't judge a guy like Evan Turner too early.
Yeah, the other thing, too, is that he adds a security blanket, if you will, for the team. I mean, last season, the second that Lillard or McCollum turned an ankle, you were afraid that the Blazers' backcourt rotation would completely, fall to pieces, because all of a sudden, shout out to Mike Barrett, all of a sudden, if you only have one point guard and Damian Lillard gets 2 fouls in the first 4 minutes, you have no hope in that game. And that's alleviated a little bit with Evan Turner now to take some of the pressure off instead of Gerald Henderson.
So we're talking about depth. We're talking about options. And one thing that I think of when I think of depth and I think of options, I think of how bad could a team be. So let's talk about the Blazers floor. Okay, this is supposed to be kind of a quasi-season preview podcast. This Blazers team has a good collection of NBA talent, if nothing else. What do you think, even accounting for injury, and I just want to give a shout out to Nate Duncan and Daniel LaRue of the Dunked On podcast. They've been doing a series of season outlooks, which you should absolutely check out. And one thing that they do when they ask the reporter for the team for whom they're previewing, they say, don't think about injuries when you think about, how this team can do. Well, let's do the opposite. Let's think about injuries. How bad do you think this Blazers team could be? Because I look at how much NBA talent they have, and I see that they have a pretty high floor. It's difficult to see this team performing at a rate of lower than, say, 40 games, even accounting for injuries. What do you two think of that, Chris? Let's start with you.
If Dame goes down for any substantial period of games, that's 500 basketball they're playing, in my opinion, right? Do you guys think without Damian Lillard, this team is going to be better than a 500 basketball team when you average it out?
Probably not.
But we're talking about floor, so let's say that Damian misses 10 games, which would be the most of his career. They're still 5-5 in those 10 games if they play 500. And the fact that they have enough firepower to theoretically play 500 without him says a lot.
I think they could weather a storm. If Dame goes down for a substantial period of time. Like I said, 500 ball, and then he comes back after 10 games, which would be the most that he's missed in his career. And he's actually looking pretty healthy after, I think, maybe taking a bit of a break this summer in terms of whatever activities he was doing after that plantar fasciitis he was suffering from down the stretch of last year's regular season and into the playoffs. And I think Terry Stotts is creative enough with his rotations, and he's shown in the past an ability to be able to handle is how his rotation works when a starter goes down. So I have faith that the Blazers' floor doesn't get that low, even in light of any injuries to even important guys on the team.
Let me throw some numbers out there, or a number. 44 wins last season. They started last year's version of Noah Vonleh for 50-something. They lost Dame for several games. They lost Myers Leonard, who was shooting the lights out by the time he went down. Gerald Henderson didn't even join the team practically until January. So it wasn't that they weren't without diversity. And now this year, you add a completely healthy team and you swap out Henderson for Evan Turner, who's a slight upgrade. So I can't imagine that this team is going to win fewer than 44 games. I think this team absolutely is going to at least match last year's team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this Blazers team and look at every single position from 1 through 5. If any one of their starters get injured, the Blazers have someone else who can slide either into their place or can slide into someone else's place who can then take the place of the person who was injured. And Chris, I just wanted to call back to what you said earlier about Damian Lillard looking fresh. Damian Lillard is, and it's preseason, so whatever. But A, he has looked really good and bouncy. And B, Damian Lillard is the NBA's preseason most efficient scorer. He's averaging 37 points per 48 minutes, which is a useless metric. But the point is that he looks really, really good. I would assume that the plantar fasciitis is behind him. And so I'm really excited to see what he does this year. And again, the Blazers have a contingency plan 1 through 5. And now if 2 players get injured, that's something else. But if someone gets injured, I think they can account for it for sure.
One thing I do worry about a little bit is the ceiling of this team. Once we get to the playoffs and you can't, change your lineup from week to week or month to month or game to game to outscore someone, and you are forced to make adjustments with your 5 best players, I don't know that the Blazers' 5 or 6 or 7 top players are better than 5 or 6 or 7 top players of the true competitors. Damian Lillard got swallowed up last year in the playoffs. He shot something like 33% from 2-point range, which is just inexcusable, but he didn't really have a choice because the other guys in the team couldn't really get going for a variety of reasons. Evan Turner has a similar drop-off in efficiency in the playoffs. His shooting numbers are pretty terrible historically for the playoffs. And so I worry a little bit about what the postseason ceiling is going to be and whether or not the Blazers' abundance of regular season medium-level rotation guys can gel together to excel against a team with an elite top 5.
So I want to get back real quick to you mentioning you can't imagine the Blazers winning fewer than 44 games this season based on their own injuries and dealing with adversity last year and everything else. But you do have to, and listeners may want to punch me in the face when they hear this, but you do have to think about external factors here: the Suns, Pelicans, Grizzlies, and Mavs. Some Utah Jazz, injury depleted teams. There was a lot going on around the Blazers in the Western Conference that did a lot help them get to 44 wins. I'm not going to claim any amount or percentage of that is based on whatever. I'm just saying that's something that we do probably have to acknowledge when we're talking about this team's floor. So it's just something I want to keep in mind. If other teams are as healthy as the Blazers were last season, I could see this being an incredibly competitive Western Conference, particularly there at the middle to the back end of the playoff teams.
I think that's a totally fair argument, and I do think that you see a readjustment in the Western Conference to where that kind of bubble of teams that are just barely making or missing the playoffs, the win totals are going to be a lot higher this year than they were last year, right? I mean, barring another unprecedented stretch of injuries for those teams that you mentioned. But then on the other hand, you have, if you look at the Blazers, the way they're currently constructed, and you think last year, did anyone think that CJ McCollum would take the step that he took? Did anyone think that Alan Crabb would take the step that he took? If you look at this current Blazers team, as they're currently constructed, and you look at maybe one player that takes a step forward, I do think that you see a team that could be slightly more successful than last year, even in a conference that is stronger than it was last year because of the injuries, as you just mentioned.
All valid points. And Eric, I want to get back to what you brought up, because you did mention that you had some worries about the Blazers, in the postseason when they have to deal with another team being able to, game plan for 7 potential games against that specific team. Isn't that the point of bringing in a guy like Evan Turner? Before Chris Paul went down with an injury, Blake Griffin went down with an injury in the first round, and JJ Redick was hobbled. They were kind of throwing everything at Damian Lillard and really forcing him in to really uncomfortable positions that we saw the way that didn't really work out for the Blazers in the first 2 games before all those guys got hurt. And isn't that the point of bringing in a dude like Evan Turner, so you're not having to pass to Mason freaking Plumlee at the top of the key to run your offense when Dame and CJ get double teamed?
I mean, they need to find some kind of bailout option in the playoffs this year, some secondary or tertiary scorer who can take the pressure off Lillard. And it looks like Plumlee, he hit a jumper against Utah last night. So cross your fingers that he has a 15-footer now that would help immensely. Myers Leonard might be around in the playoffs. Cross your fingers that he keeps shooting 40% from 3. But yeah, one of those guys, someone like that's going to have to pan out and really take a leap for the Blazers to have a chance at competing in the playoffs, I think.
Hey, you know what? Mason Plumlee hit the game-winning jumper in double overtime in Fan Fest. So don't be dissing Mason Plumlee's jumper. No, I actually think that Mason Plumlee, even if it's like psychological, like, oh, I can hit a jumper now, and he's saying it in the media, and he's showing that he's willing to take it, I think we all know that even the threat of someone shooting pulls the defense out just a little bit and relieves just a little bit of pressure, whereas last year, it goes out. You know he's not going to shoot. This year, at least if he's willing to shoot, it may bend the defense just a little bit. Shout
out to Brandon Goldner for somehow making the preseason sound relevant by drawing an example from FanFest.
Mason's going to have to hit, a decent percentage of his shots for at least half the season for his jumper to keep opposing defenses honest and for them to game plan against it, in my opinion.
But, I mean, last year he wouldn't even get into triple threat. He would be looking to pass or dribble. He would never, ever be looking to shoot. I think, honestly, and maybe I'm completely off base, I think even the fact that in his mind he thinks that perhaps I can shoot, if that is demonstrated in the way that he is holding the ball, if he looks like he's going to shoot, I think even in that split second, you have two defenders looking out of the corner of their eye and they're looking at a guy who looks like he may be shooting. That may give you enough relief to do things that you otherwise would not be able to do.
If DeAndre Jordan got into the triple threat position from 15 feet out, would you guard him or would you go stand under the basket for the rebound?
I don't know if that's a fair question because, again, DeAndre Jordan hasn't said anything about, hey, I want to start hitting jump shots. DeAndre Jordan has not made a game-winning double overtime game winner during FanFest. So how dare you? How dare you, Eric Griffith?
So whose confidence in their own shooting ability, or rather, I should say, who do you think needs to improve the confidence in their own shooting ability? If we're talking about Mason Plumlee or Myers Leonard?
The thing about Myers Leonard is that he can shoot, right? I mean, Mason Plumlee just straight up can't really shoot, not a great shooter. Myers Leonard can shoot. And so it is, I mean, it's the endless frustration and maybe now his reasonable, in this new universe of where the salary cap is going, his reasonable 4 over 40 contract will maybe give him just some mental relief. The fact that Myers Leonard can shoot and refuses to shoot sometimes, passes up shots, seems to get discouraged. I don't know. To me, I think that that's a good point. That is probably more important for the Blazers as a team to clean up than to make someone learn how to shoot. Someone who can already shoot, just telling them, look, be comfortable with it. Don't worry about it. Just shoot and let whatever happens. Que sera, sera. I think that is actually more important in the end than Mason Plumlee hitting a jump shot.
So let me just, I guess, frame this as a hypothetical for you guys, because now I'm kind of thinking about it. What would you rather have this next season from Portland's, two guys who are going to be playing a bunch of minutes at center? Myers Leonard hitting, let's say, 37% on 3.5 3-point attempts per game, or Mason Plumlee hitting a very LaMarcus Aldridge level 43% on his mid-range jumpers that may be taken, let's say, 3 of those shots a game. Which one would you rather have, and which one do you think would be more beneficial for the Blazers?
Well, I think that you're underselling Myers Leonard a little bit on saying only 37% from 3-point land. I'm pulling up his stats real quick, and I believe, he had a positive split every month last season from 3-point range. What that means was that he got better over time every single month the team played. So you can't necessarily take his overall season percentage. I think he's going to be up probably, and last year, by the way, it was at 38%. So even with that horrendous November, he was still at 38. I think you're looking at least 40% from 3 from Myers Leonard.
But would you trade that for Mason Plumlee hitting 43% of his mid-range jumpers is what I'm saying?
No, but I would trade it for Myers Leonard playing 82 games. Myers Leonard is a good defensive rebounder. His passing is probably 90% of what Plumlee's is. His shooting is far better. He's a little less mobile on defense, but he has the size to body up against some guys that maybe Mason Plumlee can't quite handle, like Al Jefferson, Marc Gasol. And so I would hope for Myers Leonard to stay healthy versus giving Mason Plumlee a 15-foot jump shot.
Eric, I bequeath to thee the Blazers Edge hot take oven mitts for saying that Myers Leonard will shoot at least 40% from deep this year. You have earned them. At least 40%. I am
standing by that. You know what? You should bring that up in 3 months and let's double check and see what happens, because I am positive I'm correct.
All right,
absolutely. Here's
a hypothetical for you guys. What's more likely, Evan Turner or Mo Harkless hitting 36%+ from outside this year?
I think it's hands down Mo Harkless. And also, it is encouraging to see that Mo Harkless has said and has demonstrated that he has fixed his jump shot. And it's really interesting when you think about what are the different ways in which people can maybe lack confidence in their shot. You can think about Meyers Leonard, think about Mo Harkless. The thing that he pointed to was that he kept watching the ball out of his hand when he shot, and that was giving him problems when he shot. And this year he said it was very simple. He worked on it. He's been told it for years that it's something he has to work on. And this year he made a concerted effort to not look at the ball when he shoots. And I definitely think that Mo Harkless has a better chance of being a better outside shooter than Evan Turner, hands down, no question.
Let me ask you guys some trivia. What do you think Meyers Leonard shot from three for the calendar year 2016 last season?
44%, I'll guess.
Brandon?
37.5%.
Chris nailed it somehow. 43.5%.
Close enough.
43.5%. So that's why I'm going to stand by that he's going to be able to shoot 40% from three this season, because he has 3% of wiggle room from last year.
How many threes per game was he taking during that stretch? And you don't even have to get the exact numbers, ballpark it, because it can't be like 5 or 6 a game, right? Like it's probably like 2.5 per game, something like that.
He shot 115 over 33 games. 115 divided by 33.
So like 3 and change.
3.5.
That's a fair amount of threes. I'll give him that. But I mean, obviously, another question is, would you trade Meyers Leonard being more confident in his shot and shooting, let's say 5 threes per game, which is a decent number of shots, for a slightly lower percentage? I would much rather that he shoot more and not make as many of them than like be really, really cautious and tiptoe around it and like only shoot when he absolutely thinks it's going to go in. That's not as valuable for your team. I mean, again, and not trying to say I'm on the Mason Plumlee train for hitting jump shots, but just to say, if you are a threat and the other team knows that you're a threat, that opens up stuff for your offense that you can't otherwise get. If you're being completely cautious and totally selective about your shots, you do not see that same benefit.
I think you're underselling Meyers Leonard a little bit. He definitely stumbled out of the gate, but before the injury, remember that game against Indiana where he scored 11 consecutive points? That's just one example. He had several great performances towards the end of his personal season last year. And I think as he gets more comfortable on the floor and more comfortable with his spot in the rotation, and he can develop that rhythm during the season with the players, with the other players on the team, I think he's going to be very valuable. And so I'm willing to give him another year to figure that out.
I definitely think that's a possibility. And frankly, Meyers Leonard is one of those players who could take a legitimate step forward, both in productivity and consistency, that would make the Blazers a hell of a lot better than they were last year for sure.
Absolutely. And something we kind of danced around a little bit was Mo Harkless, and that's kind of been quite the topic around these parts. And I think it's still a little bit unresolved. So if we're looking at Mo Harkless likely being the starter at small forward, do you guys think that was the right move, assuming that's what Terry Stotts does going into the regular season?
I think it was the right move insofar as that's how the Blazers ended last season. It was working really well for him, so I don't see why you wouldn't keep that going until it doesn't work anymore.
I totally agree. He has the best defensive synergy with Aminu, and they're able to cover more matchups than they would be able to cover with a Crabbe in there right now. Maybe if Crabbe improves on defense a little bit, that'll be more of an option. But they're going to be able to score points when CJ and Damian Plumlee are out there. That's not going to be an issue. And so really solidifying that starting 5 defense, which they did in the last 20 games of last season, by putting Harkless out there again, I think is the right move.
And the other thing, too, and just to give another shout out to the Rip City Report with Casey Holdall and Joe Freeman, they were talking about different kinds of players and when they thrive and when they don't thrive. Because basketball players, as much as we want to see them as kind of automatons or robots or quote unquote basketball players, they're still human beings. They have tendencies, they have emotions, etc. And Mo Harkless is one of those players, and I agree with this, what they said, that he is one of those players that needs to be believed in a little bit, that needs to have support a little bit. You have other players on the opposite end of that spectrum. Perhaps Wesley Matthews comes to mind right away, who thrives off people not believing in him and people thinking that he's not very good. He uses that as motivation, does Wesley Matthews. But people like Mo Harkless and perhaps like Meyers Leonard will benefit from having a contract. They're signed for 4 years. They're getting paid for 4 years. They know what their role is, and particularly for Mo Harkless, he's coming from an Orlando team that basically tossed him onto the scrap heap into a Blazers system that very much values him. He's proven his value, and perhaps maybe with that confidence and that kind of, that show of confidence from the team in him, maybe he will be more consistent this year and will produce a little bit more consistently than he has in years past.
I definitely agree with you. What you're saying about Harkless starting and the Blazers, and in particular Terry Stotts having a belief in him and that benefiting him, I think that's been it's pretty. You could see that in his performance, after he started last season and the way he played coming off the bench. I do think that Cool Breeze has the mental makeup to be able to come off the bench and not take anything like that. Personally, my question is with Evan Turner. I haven't watched enough Celtics, Pacers, and Philly games when he was with those teams to really know how he plays coming off the bench. I know he did really well for Celtics fans in a starting role, I believe. Maybe I have this backwards. Eric, what do you think?
He's been a reserve. He was a reserve for the Celtics. He's never really started for a winning team. He started in Philly when they were not very good, better than they are now, but they still weren't great when he was starting. And that's a role that he thrives in. He also closed out a lot of games in Boston. Blazers fans will remember that he hit a game-winning jumper against the Blazers last year. I think it was in the Moda Center even. And so that's definitely a role that he's going to be 100% fine in. I don't foresee any mental block with him jumping into the game 6 minutes into the first quarter.
Yeah, so that I see that Harkless starting at small forward with Alan Crabb and Evan Turner, coming in off the bench to provide support on the wings. I don't see that being any type of a chemistry issue.
One thing to keep in mind is that confidence in Mo Harkless. We're talking about how much faith and confidence they have in Mo Harkless. He was the last player signed this summer. And if the Blazers had gotten their top choice in free agency, Chandler Parsons, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now because Mo Harkless would absolutely not be the starting small forward and he might not be on the team. So they do have confidence in Mo Harkless, but it's important to remember that it only goes so far and they probably do want an upgrade. Maybe Alan Crabb, who knows?
Well, you just bring up an interesting question. Maybe it's not a fair question, and if not, then you can tell me. But what would you prefer for this Blazers team? Would you prefer that they have Evan Turner and Mo Harkless, or would you prefer that they have Chandler Parsons, who, by the way, his knee injury, more serious than first expected, has had multiple surgeries on that knee at this point in his late 20s. Evan Turner and Mo Harkless, or Chandler Parsons?
We're not allowed to get political on here, so I'm not going to accuse you of pandering to or concern trolling, we'll say, instead of pandering. But you're concern trolling with those knee questions. He's had 2 injuries to the knee, all within a year. He had the hybrid microfracture surgery, and then he had a follow-up meniscus surgery. That's happened to many players. If he fully recovers this season and he gets through the year without any setbacks, I think it's safe to say that's behind him. So it's definitely a concern, but this is not a Festus Ezeli where we're injecting him with anti-arthritis medication in hopes that he can, pull a season together. This is someone who has a legitimate chance of rehabbing and being a complete NBA player and who looked really good when healthy last season.
That's fair enough, but also Dallas wasn't really anxious to throw a ton of money at him, and he was supposed to come back way before now, and he is still out. You don't find that to be concerning at all?
It's still the preseason. I'm never concerned when players sit out in the preseason. Talk to me around November 15th if he's still out, and then I'll be worried.
And also, dude, a healthy Chandler Parsons, I don't know what reports to believe. I think Eric's pretty right on with the wait-and-see approach here. But assuming a healthy Chandler Parsons, you put that starting next to Dame and CJ, like who do opposing teams freaking choose to guard? Like, you can't double Damian Lillard or CJ when you have a guy like Chandler Parsons to alleviate the pressure off both of them.
That's true, but I do have to say this. When you think about the human body, and again, basketball players are not robots, they're people, you don't know what could go wrong, and I do understand that, yes, you have to assume that with technology being what it is, and Eric, as you said, that kind of hybrid microfracture surgery is not, even though the word microfracture is in it, people should not get the impression that it's an Amari Stoudemire or a Greg Oden situation. You're absolutely correct. That is not what Chandler Parsons is facing. But despite that, I do think there's something to be said for Evan Turner's durability. How many games has he missed in his career? Like less than a couple dozen over.
You mean the DNP CDs in Indiana for half a year, or injury games missed?
Clearly injury related. Thank you, Eric, for clarifying. Injury related games that he has missed, not very many. And I do think that there is something to that. The same way that there's something to having a deep team, there is something about having a player that is not often injured. And you're right, perhaps these injuries are not going to follow Chandler Parsons. But to be clear, Evan Turner is a much, much healthier player than Chandler Parsons has been.
Hey. Evan Turner missed 4 games his rookie year.
Hey, there we go.
Ooh.
And since then, he has missed 3.
There you go. Incredible. You have 2 ends of the spectrum in terms of durability when you're looking at CP and ET there. But
you also have the right opinion, which is mine, and the wrong opinion, which is Eric's. Clearly.
Wrong.
Check in with Myers Leonard's 3-point shooting around January.
If I'm concerned with anything, assuming, yes, the injuries, that's probably the main concern with Chandler Parsons. I'm going to give you that, Brandon, in my opinion. But if I'm concerned with anything else with Chandler, Dame, and CJ, I think they're going to score 1 million points. They would score 1 million points a game. I think they'd give up 1,000,001 points a game. You have Mason Plumlee starting as the center. Al-Farouq Aminu can't guard 5 different players. I think the defense would be a nightmare with Chandler Parsons in the starting lineup.
Chris, I'm glad you brought up the defense. Let's move on from the hypothetical of Chandler Parsons, since he's not going to be in a Blazer uniform, and talk about someone who might, keyword might, be in a Blazer uniform. Festus Ezeli. I think he, if healthy, is going to be literally the savior of this team. He is the one who could make them a legitimate conference finals opponent for someone. But he hasn't been able to get on the court yet. Do you guys have hope that this season we're going to see much of Festus Ezeli, and if we do, if he's going to be effective?
First of all, how much peyote are you dropping to think that Festus Ezeli is the thing that's going to push a team into conference final contention? I don't see it maybe quite that strongly, but yeah, I mean, I do see him coming back, and I agree with you. I think that Festus Ezeli is the kind of the archetype of a center that the Blazers were looking for this offseason and weren't able to get. Had Festus Ezeli been perfectly healthy, and let's keep in mind, I think that Festus Ezeli has played a combined 85 games over the last couple of years, or maybe slightly less than that. So it's like 40 games apiece the last couple of seasons due to injury. And, obviously the Blazers got him at a deep discount. We can have a whole nother conversation about the way his contract is structured to where the Blazers, if he's good, the Blazers won't be able to afford him.
We've already done that.
Yeah, we've already done that. So if you're listening and you haven't heard that episode before, we talked about basically if Festus is good, the Blazers can't retain him. And if he's bad, well, then he's bad. And that kind of sucks. But yes, I do think that he offers the Blazers something that they have not had lately, which is a legitimate, solid defensive presence, someone who can clean up the messes caused by the sub-average defense of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. And I do think that he will get significant play this season. If his knee craps out, his knee craps out. There's not a whole lot you can do about that, but I do think that he's going to play a role this season. I think Blazers fans are really going to fall in love with him once he gets into the swing of things.
Yeah, what about setting screens for guys like Dame, CJ, Evan Turner? I'm not sure if he's going to be able to put enough together to be a consistent finisher in the pick and roll. But in terms of setting screens and putting a big body out there, who on the Blazers even has the potential to be as effective as Festus Ezeli? Maybe Myers Leonard, if he could put it all together, has the bulk to set as effective picks. Ed Davis, Mason Plumlee, those guys aren't quite as bulky as Festus or Myers. I mean, I think a healthy Festus, that's going to be probably his number one role in the offense, is just being a huge body and getting in the way of defenders.
I think that's fair. And beyond just being a huge body, there is something about that mentality of a defensive center who knows that they're a defensive center, right? So you think about when you're playing basketball, anyone who's played basketball is going to understand. And believe me, I'm an expert. I played through JV in high school, so I know what I'm talking about. But when you expend a certain amount of energy on one end, that's slightly less energy that you have for the other end. And yes, you have tons of examples of amazing two-way players in the NBA. That's true. But if you are a defensive center and you know that your role is defense, then yes, you're going to have the mentality to be good at setting those screens and being like a good big body with a lot of gravity. And B, that's where you're going to be spending your energy. Festus is not going to be demanding touches or get upset that he's not a part of the offense. And I don't even think, let's imagine a future in which the Blazers need Festus to start. Do you remember how when the Blazers had Robin Lopez, it seemed like almost every time the first play out of the gate, they would run a play to get Rolo a shot? I don't even think that you would see that with Festus Ezeli. I really don't. So yes, I do think that he could add quite a bit on the defensive end. And I do not think the Blazers have a player like him at all.
That's the old Dikembe Mutombo rule. Give your defensive center the first shot of each half to make sure he's happy, and then he'll never see the ball again. So shout out to Dikembe Mutombo and the infamous stories about him. You know, we missed one big body. Noah Vonleh. Dude looks maybe 20 pounds heavier, looks all muscle, not to get into preseason platitudes, but I think he hit the weight room a little bit this summer, and I think he's going to be all the better for it. And he's one of the only guys, in my opinion, that kind of has that Ezeli potential where he could become a difference maker for the team and could knock them over the edge.
And the difference with Vonleh, between Vonleh and Ezeli, is that Vonleh has a legitimate offensive repertoire, right? I mean, you saw it that game in the preseason where he hit like 3 baby hooks and a jump shot. He could pull it out to 3. He has relatively decent footwork once he gets down low. He's not particularly good off the dribble, nor do you need him to be. But yeah, I mean, he can shoot. He has some post moves, and I agree with you. Noah Vonleh is definitely an X factor heading into the season.
Does he have you mentioned his effect on the Blazers offense, at least potentially. What's his ceiling on the defensive end there? Can he play rim protecting center for the Blazers? Is that something that looks possible in his future?
I think we literally don't know because he's so young, and playing defense in the NBA, a lot of it's about experience and learning the angles and learning how to use your leverage against guys that size. One thing we saw last year was that he got outsmarted a lot. He was always getting smoked by more experienced players, even players who were a little bit towards the tail end of their career were able to basically confuse him. And so I think some of that is going to be, now that he has the physical, his body's filling out, he's getting the physical tools together. Let's see where he is at mentally and see if he can start to learn how to play NBA defense. And then we'll be able to identify his weaknesses, because at this point, we don't even know what his strengths or weaknesses are.
And I think that's an excellent point. It's something that was brought up last week when we had Daniel LaRue on the podcast, which is, think about this Blazers team and their defense, right? And Chris, I mean, this is a point that you brought up again and again, how Stotts in year one, when he had the previous iteration of the Blazers, really focused on offense, and he tightened up that defense in year 2. You have the same thing this time. And again, shout out to Chris for bringing this up. Coach Stotts focused on offense last year, maybe this year. This is where he turns the screws on defense. And you think about Damian Lillard, just his second year as the best player on the team, CJ McCollum's second year as a starter, Alvin Crabbe's second year as a rotation player, Mason Plumlee's second year as a starter. And I mean, Noah Vonleh is still, how old is he? 21? I mean, he's super duper young. Big guys sometimes take a little bit longer to develop. And I do think that that concept of team defense, of taking time, needing NBA reps and needing NBA minutes. I mean, it's actually a blessing that the Blazers had those minutes available for Noah Vonleh last year, and that may actually end up accelerating his development down the line, even if he doesn't play a ton this year.
Does it feel like to you guys at all, with the expectations for him in Summer League, to maybe be a leader out there and be the double-double machine we know that he should be against competition like he would be playing against in the Summer League? Maybe him not living up to those expectations this summer. Do you see that kind of roller coaster there where in the preseason you see that, what was that, the 14-14 game, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, Noah Vonleh is a freaking part of this front court, and now Terry Stotts is going to have to find a way to get him into that front court rotation. And, after saying, gosh, I don't even know how this guy is going to find his way onto the court back in August.
So 2 things. Number 1, Summer League is not the end-all be-all. We saw, it's concerning when someone doesn't do well in Summer League, but preseason, I think, is even more indicative of possible success during the NBA regular season. So to me, his success during the preseason has canceled out any concerns from Summer League. Number two, even if he can't get minutes, we've seen with the Stotts/Olshey teams, not getting regular season minutes is not a death knell for a player's development. Allen Crabbe and CJ McCollum, both, they were so far down the rotation, they ended up on D-League teams, And now look at them. Now they're both playing. One of them's a fringe all-star candidate. The other one's making $17 million a season. And so I think the same thing could happen with Vonleh, where he could ride the pine for 45, 50 games. Someone could unfortunately sprain an ankle, separate a shoulder, and Vonleh could immediately step in and pick up where he will hopefully pick up ahead of where he left off last season.
Yeah, I mean, if Al-Farouq Aminu goes down for any extended period of time, hey, at least the Blazers have a player behind him who has starter experience, right? I mean, that's super useful. So I agree with you. I think Noah Vonleh could definitely take a step forward this year.
For the record, if that happened, I would hope they slide Harkless over and start Crabbe.
Hey, you know what? Don't poke holes in my theories, buddy boy.
All right, nerds. It's time to get to probably my favorite. This has got to be the favorite segment I've ever had on the podcast. We do it every offseason. I feel like the last offseason podcast we have, being October 22nd or so, is an appropriate one to bring up player nicknames, because this is an incredibly important topic to me and I want to get your guys' take on it. So in doing research, and it's important to note that Basketball Reference, among many other resources and statistics and any type of analysis you want to dig into, you can really do anything you want on Basketball Reference. But one of my favorite things that they bring to the table is that they list players' nicknames, or their popular nicknames as they're known. We asked Martell Webster about his nickname that was listed, the definition. We ended up getting an actually really interesting response from him on that one. So anyway, that's one of my favorite features of Basketball Reference, is checking out the nicknames for players, because you always find something interesting or surprising there. So I'm going to go through the list here, and I want to rank these guys starting from number 15 going down to number 1, and I want to get your thoughts on here, and you guys can let me know if I'm wrong, and I'm going to explain to you guys that you guys are absolutely wrong on this one. So right off the bat here, there's 4 dudes in a Portland Trailblazers uniform who do not have a nickname. I couldn't find it on Basketball Reference. I couldn't find it on a Google search. It's not in their Twitter handle or anything. That's CJ McCollum. That's that is kind of a nickname because it's his initials. Does anyone know what his actual name is? The C and the J stand for?
Christian James.
There we go. So CJ is technically a nickname, but it's also technically not. Noah Vonleh doesn't have a nickname listed anywhere. Pat Connaughton, for some reason, doesn't have one listed anywhere. And Grant Jarrett, couldn't find anything on him. So CJ, Noah, Pat, and Jarrett, Grant Jarrett, get on that, guys. We need to be able to put you on this list. I'm going to start from number 11 here. And the bottom half of this list is super freaking boring. And I hate this with player nicknames, when you just get a shortening, condensed version of their names. So for like Maurice Harkless, I'm started out at number 11 here. He's got Mo. Damian has Dame. Mason Plumlee has Mace. Shabazz Napier.
Those aren't nicknames, by the way, for the record.
This is what's listed on Basketball Reference, so you can freaking take it up with their editors, Eric.
I just want to clarify that these are decidedly not nicknames.
How dare you come on my podcast and tell me how we're going to grade nicknames?
Brandon, can we get a tie-breaking vote?
I am going to overturn your objection and say, Chris, please continue.
Oh, all right. Look who wins. Okay, so number 8, Shabazz, quote-unquote, Baz Napier. And then this is where we get into actual nicknames, so I'll give you that, Eric. It doesn't really start until number 7 here. And I have Myers Leonard. I have Legend. I've never liked Myers Legend as a nickname. Is that something that you guys actually... do you guys dig that nickname?
Only when you sub out the E's for 3s.
No. That's the worst. Do you actually like that, or are you being...
I am all for it. 100% for it. It's amazing.
So, Eric, how do you pronounce that then with the 3s in there?
legend. It's just your elite speak. It's elite
No,
speak.
But how does that make it any better if when you say it, it doesn't change?
It's so unimaginative too. I mean, okay, so we just no.
And why is he a legend? What has he done to be legendary? And he's growing out his hair. He grows out a mustache.
Sarcastic nickname. It's a joke.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. But it's not funny enough. Like, it's too sad, right? Like, if Myers Leonard were funny and like self-deprecating, like if Myers Leonard were like Joel Embiid, who's like, by the way, like instantly my favorite player ever.
Yeah.
He's
slide
like
into your DMs, right?
Did you see his reaction to Boban?
It was, I mean, that's just one example of how brilliant he is and how hilarious he is. But when you call Myers Leonard legend and he's not a self-deprecating dude, it's just sad. So I don't care if there are threes. I don't care if you have apostrophes. I don't care if you have parentheses. I hate that nickname.
Let me put the oven mitts on and just point out that it may be sarcastic at the moment, but I have faith that Myers legend will become a very applicable nickname by the end of the season when he's shooting 42.5% from three in May.
You know what? Okay, here's my proposed nickname for Myers Leonard. Let's assume, as we've all talked about, that he will make a step on defense and at the very least become a reasonable shot blocker. We can call him the Blockinator because not only can he block shots, he can block people on Twitter like nobody's business. Double entendre, bam, nickname.
We could work with that. That's a good starting point. I don't know if that's where I would finish with that. This was probably 2013. Dane Carbaugh was one of the first guests on the Blazers Edge Weekend podcast, and he threw out Myers Lemon. I like that one. It's kind of a silly name, right?
That also is pretty kind of mean for the dude, considering that that he's still looking for that to make that leap, because it sounds like a bad used car.
Oh, come on! It's not. You were the one throwing out sarcastic nicknames earlier with legend, and you can't.
But that's not sarcastic because I believe it's going to become true.
All right, so how about one more? Let me throw one more out for Myers. What about Myers? He does something good. Myers.
Maybe for wheels, but that's like the natural with Brandon Roy. No one's being like, "Hey, dude, did you see the natural last night? That was dope," right? But like when Wheels says it, it's totally fine. So yeah, I could see that being one of those announcer nicknames. We're gonna move on to number 6. I got Festus Ezeli. I couldn't find anything official, but his Twitter handle is something along the lines of Fezzy. And I know that's kind of a shortening and just adding a Y to the end of a dude's name, but for some reason I find that infinitely more likable than shortening something like, Mason to Mace. What do you guys think about Fezzy?
It's better than Dame, I guess.
Well, I'm verifying now on my Twitter phone. Yeah, Festus's Twitter handle is just Festus, like @Festus. So
I don't know where I found that then, but at one point his Twitter handle was Fezzy. I'm putting that down as his official nickname on the Blazers Edge Weekend podcast, number 6. You guys dig it, or do you think you should find something else? I know you. Let me guess. You guys are gonna go with something with Festivus for the rest of us, something along those lines. Am I right?
Absolutely, Seinfeld reference. But what I would say is not the obvious Festus for the rest of us. By the way, Seinfeld, greatest show ever. And if you disagree, you can just turn the podcast off right now. I would go with something that describes what he does as a basketball player, that describes what he brings to the Blazers, and I would call him the feats of strength. Absolutely.
Ooh, okay, we're getting there. Eric, do you have any take on this, or are you okay with Fezzy?
Well, if we're going to use the standard of what he brings to the team, I don't know that we can give him a nickname yet.
Ooh.
I'm just saying, like, what he could potentially bring to the team. And by the way,
DNP maybe.
Ouch.
Festus, if you
that was your standard, Brandon. That was all Brandon's standard.
Turn it back on me.
Okay, so you guys are okay with that at number 6, I assume. Number 5, I'm gonna move on. I like this nickname, but for some reason it didn't crack my top 4. There's some better ones. Al-Farouq Aminu, Chief. It's a good one. I mean, I call him Chief sometimes when I'm talking about him. I especially appreciated Mike Barrett last season when he was calling the games. Called him Chief quite a bit. I thought it flowed really nicely. Do you think that is appropriate there in the top 5?
Farouk translates from Arabic to chief, is the reason for that nickname, by the way.
Oh, word. See, there's Eric Griffith bringing the trivia to the Blazers Edge podcast every time.
And the other thing, I mean, personally, I don't think Chief is a super awesome nickname in and of itself. But one thing that is kind of cool, if you go to Blazers games or at Moda Center and Al-Farouq Aminu does something cool, what do they play? Hail to the Chief. And I think that is actually pretty neat when you can tie in your nickname to the fan experience in the arena. So for me, he does get bonus points for that. And whoever's managing the music at Moda Center also gets bonus points for that.
I really miss Martell Webster because they used to play the theme song to Webster, which I never watched, but it was always just a nice little like inside joke for the people in the arena.
DJ OG1 does the music for the Moda Center, so shout out to him.
Shout out.
There's a good guest for the podcast.
Word.
DJ OG1, if you are listening, you're welcome on this podcast anytime. We can't pay you, but we will definitely give you a hearty thank you, no doubt.
Hit us up. So Chief Al-Farouq Aminu, he does the aggressive 3-point like salute when he hits a 3. The listeners can't see us, but if you can imagine the kind of whatever Admiral salute, bam, super aggressive. I think it fits with the Chief thing. I think it goes really well. There's not much there I would change. Number 4 here, and I'm gonna let you guys guess which player this is because I found this on Basketball Reference. Surprised me enough that I had to put it into my top 4 because I think it's pretty dope. Sunshine is the nickname here. Any ideas as to which player under contract with the Portland Trailblazers that is?
It is very tough. I'm trying to run through all the Blazers under contract. I have no idea. I'm drawing blank. Eric, you got anything?
Jake Layman.
Yep, that's the dude.
Oh, process of elimination. I did not know that.
Jake Layman's official nickname is apparently Sunshine. I liked it so much, I had to put it in the top 4. I mean, I can't... Wasn't that from Remember the Titans? Wasn't that some dude's nickname was Sunshine or something? Maybe I just pulled that out of thin air.
You probably did. But just to tie this back to the fan experience, it would be pretty dope if every time Jake Layman subbed out of the game, you had Bill Withers come on and be like, ain't no sunshine when he's gone. That would be super dope. But absent that, I cannot get behind the nickname personally. And I can't even think of a good alternative, frankly. So I'm always kind of critical of people who slam an idea without an alternative. And so I guess I am that person now because I don't like it, but I don't have a good alternative.
You could play on layman's terms or, however you want to do that, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
But that's too obvious. That's way too obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, if he's cool with Sunshine, I'm cool with Sunshine. And I think if we're looking at the rest of the freaking nicknames for the Blazers, it's a pretty weak field outside of the top 5. So Sunshine to me isn't that bad.
Let me ask, is Sunshine a self-given nickname like the Black Mamba, or is it something that someone else gave to him? Which, by the way, you cannot give yourself your own nickname. That is so not fair.
I am going to hop on to Twitter right now and ask Jake Layman, J Layman 10. If you guys want to follow the Blazers Edge Twitter account, it's Blazers Edge. So
with 3 more nicknames to go on the list here, we'll see if Jake Layman gets back to us on Twitter and clears up this Sunshine dilemma that we have with his nickname there. Number 3, though, this is actually another one you guys can guess. He did have a nickname. It just was his initials, which sounds pretty good. But I also found one, Turtle, number 3. You guys know who that is, right?
Yep.
Brandon?
Sure, I sure do. And Eric, why don't you tell me what I already know?
Also known as the Kid, Evan Turner.
Bam. He's got 3 nicknames. 3 nicknames officially listed. He's got E.T., Turtle, and the Kid. You know what? I can't give him the Kid because that was Kevin Garnett 20 years ago when he was a rookie coming out of high school, if I remember correctly.
Evan Turner, multiple nicknames. He has multiple ways to make you cringe when he is on offense, so I guess that makes some sense. Personally, I don't like any of his nicknames, and also I don't really like him in general. So I'm just going to go sour on Evan Turner. Again, don't like his nicknames. Don't have any suggestions. I'm sorry.
Wow. What a freaking bummer here. I had a feral cat at my house in Eugene around 2008, 2009 when I was going to school there. I used to hang out in my backyard, sleep under the porch. I used to put some food out for it. I named it Turtle on a whim for no reason. And so that's why I like Evan Turner's nickname Turtle. And that's why it's number 3 on my list, and there's nothing you guys could do about it.
I don't like it because I happen to know the origin, and it's not happy. Well, I mean, it's just a cruel kid joke. But his name is Turner, which sounds kind of like turtle, and he had a small head growing up, apparently.
Oh, no.
And so his classmates used to call him Turtle, or at least that's how I've heard it from the Boston media.
All right. So I guess we can't... I'm not gonna give him a nickname that bullies gave him as he was growing up that made fun of his physical appearance. I also can't get behind the kid because that was Kevin Garnett a couple decades ago. So I'm gonna settle for E.T. And I'm gonna have to change my list here. E.T. does definitely not go in the top 3. But I'm gonna move on anyway because this one I think was given by Mike Rice, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. Another guy who has a handful of nicknames to choose from. He's got a pretty easy name to play off of. Easy Ed Davis, but I'm going with Phys Ed. That's my number 2. I think that is it's super creative. It explains exactly, Brandon, I feel like this fits your criteria to a T. That's what he does on the court. He brings the physicality, double entendre there, play on words. What more could you want out of a nickname?
I absolutely agree. You know me too well, Chris. That is my favorite nickname on the team for sure, Phys Ed. Not only because of everything you just said, describes him on the court, it rolls off the tongue, easy to remember, but also because it harkens back to a day when we used to call PE or gym physical education, and we shortened it to phys ed. That's not something that you hear as much anymore, much the same way as the type of player that Ed Davis is. He's a lunch bucket player. He goes in, does the dirty work, doesn't ask for touches, doesn't celebrate a whole bunch. He's sort of a throwback. So in all of those senses, a quadruple entendre, if you will. I would say that for me personally, Phys Ed is number 1 on my list. Excellent nickname. No suggestions from me on that.
Was Phys Ed a Mike Barrett creation?
It's one of the Mikes. I thought it was Mike Rice. I want to give credit to the Wild One on that. Also, honorable mention, Wild One. Excellent nickname there as well.
Man, Mike Rice, Mike Barrett. We miss you both. We love Kevin Calabro. We love Lamar Hurd. But just to say, the season hasn't started yet. Can we still lament that Mike and Mike are gone? End of a generation. I agree. Yeah, bonus points to the Wild One for that nickname for sure. Slides in.
I absolutely miss them as well. But like you said, looking forward to Kevin and Lamar this season. Now, we have to wrap up this 20-minute segment that we've had on nicknames here. If any listeners have stuck around for the entire list, I want to thank you very much. By now, you might know who this is. I decided before I even took a look at the rest of the players' nicknames that this one was going to be number 1. If you argue with this, Brandon and Eric, I might just have to turn off Skype right now and cut this entire podcast off because I cannot see any type of legitimate argument going against Cool Breeze, Allen Crabbe being the number 1 nickname on the Blazers.
Yeah, Cool Breeze. It's a sick nickname, and the sickest part of that nickname are the different permutations that you can spin off from that. So we heard a couple of years ago, people were calling him ceiling fan because of Cool Breeze, air conditioner because of Cool Breeze, and because of his initials. There are so many different ways that you can take this nickname. Plus, a little fun fact about my family, my father, when he was in the Army, his nickname was also Cool Breeze, so it kind of hits a soft spot for me sentimentally. So even though I already said that Phys Ed was my favorite nickname, I am going to give both Cool Breeze and Phys Ed the number 1 spot collectively in my heart and in my mind. Excellent nicknames. Again, no suggestions from me.
Eric, you're not the guy who wants to go with crustacean puns for Crabbe instead of Cool Breeze, are you?
No. They can be useful on Twitter if you want to throw an emoji in. But I would say AC translating to Cool Breeze is pretty awesome because Allen Crabbe seems like a pretty cool guy. So it fits. So I'm going to go with that.
The only thing that would make this better is his hair this year is a little bit toned down from last year. He's still kind of got the sharp fade on the sides up into the kind of the faux hawk. He does not have those blonde tips. But just imagine if Cool Breeze got his hair just a little bit longer, put some waves in it, dyed it blue, looked like the wind.
Get out.
Cool Breeze.
And on that note, I'm gonna go ahead and say Alan Crabb, AC, ceiling fan, air conditioner, leak out, I think Wesley Matthews called him in an interview before. Cool Breeze, on down the line, number one on my nickname list, number one in my heart, Alan Crabb. You guys aren't going to argue with that, right?
No argument for me, but again...
I can't believe we agreed on something.
Well, again, I have to slide in. Easy Ed is tied for number one. I mean, Phys Ed, rather, is tied for number one. But I agree. Cool Breeze, sick nickname, excellent player. Fits it well.
All right, Eric Griffith, man, it's always a pleasure to bring you on the Blazers Edge podcast.
He's just looking at us like we're nuts, just for the listeners out there. He's just staring at us.
Watching the football game.
Fair enough.
Eric, for putting up with Brandon and I going back and forth about nicknames for a while here, I want to give you the opportunity to let Blazers Edge listeners know where they can find you on Twitter and the like.
I write a column for Blazers Edge on Thursdays as of right now. That's TBD what day of the week. I'll also be doing some of the game analysis this year, so you can find me at Blazers Edge with that. My Twitter handle is @DeeringTornado, so you can follow me there. I tweet 99 to 99.5% only about the Blazers, so I'm a safe person to follow.
All right, man. Well, thank you once again for coming on the show, and we will definitely catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, if you've gotten this far on this week's edition of the Blazers Edge podcast, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us for episode 180, and also a huge thanks to Blazers Edge contributor, staff writer, he does a lot of different things, works with the video, Eric Griffith, for coming on the show this week.
Jack of all trades, Big Griff. Please be sure to tune into the Blazers Edge midweek podcast with Dave Deckard and Dan Meringue, and don't forget to check out the Fanalist with Tara and Joe. And for Chris Luscious Lucia, I am Brandon Bum Bum Goldner. And remember, if your nicknames suck, you suck. Ain't no sunshine when he's gone.